There comes a moment in life when effort no longer feels like progress. You may still be moving, still fulfilling responsibilities, still waking up and doing what needs to be done, yet something inside feels strangely distant, as if you were participating in your own life from behind a thin layer of glass. Many people describe this as fatigue, others as lack of motivation. But beneath those labels lies a deeper sensation, the feeling of being disconnected from oneself and from the flow of life itself. It is not that opportunities have disappeared. It is that the inner space needed to perceive them has become crowded with noise, tension, and unresolved emotion. This video exists for that moment. Not for the moment of excitement, nor for the phase of blind optimism, but for the quiet crossroads where you sense that something essential needs to realign. A deep quantum connection is not about forcing reality to obey your desires. It is about restoring coherence between who you are internally and how you move through the world. When that coherence is broken, even the most sincere intentions feel heavy, delayed, or strangely out of reach. Many people try to reconnect with the universe through techniques, affirmations, or constant searching for signs, yet overlook the most decisive factor, the state from which they are living. Your energy is not defined by what you want, but by what you consistently embody. The body remembers patterns long before the mind understands them, and when those patterns are shaped by fear, urgency, or self-doubt, the field of possibilities feels distant, almost silent. This introduction is an invitation to slow down and listen differently, not outwardly but inwardly. Throughout this journey, you will not be asked to escape your pain, deny your doubts, or pretend certainty you do not feel. Instead, you will be guided to recognize how alignment begins with presence, how clarity emerges from honesty, and how the universe responds most clearly when you stop negotiating your inner truth. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to coherence and allowing possibility to meet you there. The silent misalignment that shrinks possibility. There is a subtle form of exhaustion that does not come from doing too much, but from holding oneself together for too long. It appears in people who are functional, responsible, and outwardly stable, yet internally feel compressed, as if life were asking them to fit into a shape that no longer matches who they are becoming. This state is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, persistent, and deeply confusing because it coexists with competence. You may still achieve, still show up, still care, but the sense of openness that once accompanied your efforts has gradually faded. This is where misalignment begins to operate invisibly, not as a failure of will, nor as a lack of intelligence, but as a gap between inner truth and daily orientation. When attention is constantly pulled toward survival, approval, or control, the inner field tightens. The body adapts to vigilance, the mind adapts to anticipation, and the emotional system adapts to holding rather than allowing. Over time, this adaptation becomes normal. You stop noticing how contracted your internal posture has become, and life slowly starts to feel smaller, even when circumstances appear acceptable. What many interpret as a lack of manifestation or absence of universal support is often the consequence of this contraction. Possibility does not vanish, perception narrows. When the nervous system is accustomed to scanning for threat or disappointment, it filters reality accordingly. New paths may pass directly in front of you without being registered as viable. The universe does not withhold. It reflects the bandwidth you are able to receive through. Alignment, in this sense, is not a metaphysical abstraction. It is the state of internal openness that allows perception to widen again. A deep quantum connection is frequently misunderstood as an emotional high or a mystical experience. In truth, it is far more grounded and far less dramatic. It is the quiet coherence that arises when thought, emotion, and behavior stop pulling in different directions. When inner dialogue softens, when emotional tone stabilizes, and when actions begin to reflect authentic values rather than habitual defenses, something shifts, not externally at first, but internally, in the way reality is met. Misalignment often persists because it disguises itself as responsibility. Many people remain loyal to patterns that once kept them safe. They continue to over-explain, over-perform, or over-adapt, believing that this is maturity. Yet the cost of this loyalty is energy. Not physical energy alone, but existential energy, the sense of being alive and available to life. When this energy is depleted, The idea of aligning with a field of possibilities feels abstract, almost unrealistic. The body is too busy maintaining the familiar to recognize the new. Another layer of this misalignment lies in emotional suppression that has been normalized. Sadness postponed, anger redirected inward, grief minimized, longing rationalized away. None of these disappear. They reorganize themselves into tension. That tension becomes a baseline state, and from that baseline, intentions are formed. An intention born from tension carries a different signal than one born from clarity. It carries urgency instead of trust, need instead of availability. The field responds accordingly, not as punishment, but as resonance. Many spiritual narratives suggest that alignment requires constant positivity or elevated emotion. This belief creates an additional fracture. People begin to judge their natural emotional states as obstacles, which leads to further suppression. True alignment does not require the absence of discomfort. It requires honesty within it. When an emotion is acknowledged without dramatization or denial, it completes its cycle. Energy previously trapped in resistance becomes available again, not through effort, but through integration. The mind often resists this understanding because it seeks certainty. It wants guarantees before it relaxes. Yet alignment unfolds in reverse. Relaxation precedes clarity. Safety precedes expansion. When the internal environment feels less hostile, perception naturally widens. This is why alignment cannot be forced through technique alone. Techniques applied from a contracted state tend to reinforce the contraction. They become another task, another expectation, another way of monitoring oneself. As misalignment persists, identity begins to harden. You start to define yourself by limitation rather than potential. Subtle internal statements form, rarely spoken aloud, but deeply influential. Statements like, "This is just how life is," or "I have already tried," or "It is too late to change direction." These are not beliefs in the intellectual sense. They are conclusions the body has drawn from repeated experiences of tension without release. They shape the frequency from which choices are made. Alignment begins when these conclusions are no longer taken as final truths, not through argument, but through experience. When moments of genuine presence return, even briefly, the system remembers another way of being, a moment of stillness, a moment of emotional clarity, a moment of acting in integrity without self-betrayal. These moments do not solve everything, but they interrupt the narrative of inevitability. They remind the system that expansion is still possible. The field of universal possibilities is not accessed through desire alone, but through readiness. Readiness is a somatic state. It is felt as grounded openness rather than excitement. It carries calm rather than urgency. When readiness increases, synchronicities appear less magical and more natural. Conversations align, timing shifts, insight emerges without force. Not because reality has changed its rules, but because the internal receiver has recalibrated. This chapter marks the recognition of misalignment not as a personal failure, but as an adaptive state that has outlived its usefulness. There is nothing to fix in a harsh sense. There is something to soften, something to listen to, something to release. When misalignment is seen clearly, without judgment, it loses its grip, and in that loosening, the first doorway back into possibility quietly opens. Coherence as the gateway to the field of possibilities. As misalignment becomes visible, another truth begins to surface quietly beneath it. Life does not respond primarily to intention, nor to effort, nor even to desire. It responds to coherence. Coherence is not an idea to be adopted, but a state that emerges when the inner world stops contradicting itself. When thoughts point in one direction, emotions pull in another, and behavior moves in a third, energy disperses. Nothing is wrong, yet very little moves. When these layers begin to align, something stabilizes, and stability is what allows possibility to take form. Coherence is often mistaken for confidence, but the two are not the same. Confidence can be performative, built on image or control. Coherence is quieter. It feels like internal agreement, a sense that nothing inside is arguing against the present moment. In this state, action does not feel forced, and rest does not feel like avoidance. The system stops oscillating between urgency and collapse, and begins to inhabit a middle ground where clarity can arise. This middle ground is unfamiliar to many people. It lacks the drama of striving and the familiarity of struggle. It can initially feel empty, even unsettling, yet within this apparent emptiness lies a subtle fullness. When the nervous system exits constant alert, perception becomes more refined. You notice nuances, timing, and internal signals that were previously drowned out by mental noise. This is often described as intuition, but it is more accurate to call it sensitivity returning. The field of universal possibilities does not operate through linear cause and effect alone. It responds to states of being. A coherent state sends a clear signal, not through words, but through consistency. The body, the emotional tone, and the mental orientation all communicate the same message. In this alignment, the individual no longer feels fragmented. Decisions become simpler, not because options disappear, but because resonance becomes easier to detect. Incoherence, by contrast, generates confusion. A person may say they want expansion, while their emotional system braces for loss. They may speak of trust while internally rehearsing disappointment. These contradictions are rarely conscious. They develop through years of adaptation, compromise, and unmet needs. The system learns to protect itself by holding opposing positions simultaneously. This creates an internal static that distorts perception of the external world. When coherence begins to restore itself, there is often an initial phase of discomfort. Old emotional material surfaces, not as a problem to be solved, but as tension-seeking resolution. This phase can be misinterpreted as regression. In truth, it is integration. What was once suppressed becomes available for processing. Energy previously locked in defense becomes fluid again. This is not dramatic healing, it is quiet reorganization. The concept of a quantum field of possibilities is frequently described in abstract terms, yet its practical expression is remarkably grounded. It appears as increased flexibility in response. Where once there was only one perceived option, now several appear. Where reaction dominated, choice re-enters. This expansion does not come from external change, but from internal spaciousness. The mind becomes less rigid, the body less tense, the emotional system less reactive. In that softening, new configurations become visible. Coherence also alters the relationship with time. When incoherence dominates, time feels scarce. There is a constant sense of being behind, of missing something essential. This creates pressure, which further destabilizes the system. As coherence increases, time feels more spacious. Not because there is more of it, but because attention is less fragmented. Presence replaces urgency, and with presence comes a more accurate sense of timing. Another aspect of coherence is integrity. Not in a moral sense, but in an energetic one. Integrity means wholeness. It means that what is felt internally is allowed to inform external action. When integrity is compromised repeatedly, the system learns that self-expression is unsafe. Over time, this creates a disconnect between inner truth and outer behavior. Restoring coherence involves closing this gap, not through confrontation, but through alignment. When inner signals are respected, even in small ways, trust rebuilds internally. This trust is essential for engaging with the unknown. The field of possibilities inherently contains uncertainty. Without internal trust, uncertainty is experienced as threat. With trust, it is experienced as openness. The same external condition produces entirely different internal responses depending on coherence. This is why two people can face similar circumstances and have vastly different experiences of possibility. Coherence does not eliminate fear, but it contextualizes it. Fear becomes information rather than command. It is noticed without being obeyed automatically. This shift alone dramatically alters decision-making. Actions taken from coherence carry a different quality. They are not driven by avoidance or compensation, but by alignment. The system moves toward what feels internally consistent rather than externally impressive. As coherence stabilizes, synchronicities often increase. These are not signs of special favor, but indicators of alignment. When internal state and external conditions resonate, interaction becomes smoother. Opportunities appear less as sudden miracles and more as natural extensions of direction. Conversations unfold easily, resources align, insights arise spontaneously. The effort required to navigate life decreases, not because challenges disappear, but because resistance diminishes. This chapter points toward coherence as the true gateway to the field of possibilities, not as a technique to be mastered, but as a state to be remembered. It emerges when inner fragmentation softens, when honesty replaces performance, and when presence becomes more valuable than prediction. In this state, life begins to respond differently, not because it has changed, but because you have become available to meet it more fully. The body as the silent translator of alignment. Long before the mind forms explanations, the body registers truth. It reacts to tone, pace, and internal contradiction with remarkable precision. Tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, persistent fatigue, or a sense of heaviness are not random sensations. They are communications. The body does not speak in concepts, yet it constantly translates the state of alignment or misalignment into physical experience. When this language is ignored, the message does not disappear. It simply grows louder or more diffuse. In many lives, the body becomes the place where unresolved inner conflict is stored. Thoughts may attempt optimism, yet the body remains braced. Words may speak of trust, while muscles stay contracted. This split creates a subtle form of exhaustion that cannot be resolved through rest alone. Sleep may restore physical energy, but it does not restore coherence if the body remains conditioned to tension. The result is a persistent sense of being drained without understanding why. Alignment becomes tangible when the body begins to feel included rather than managed. Inclusion does not mean indulgence but attunement. When internal states are acknowledged rather than overridden, the body gradually releases its defensive posture. This release is not dramatic. It often arrives as a slight deepening of breath, a softening of the jaw, or a sense of weight settling downward. These shifts may seem insignificant, yet they signal a profound recalibration of internal communication. The field of possibilities is often described as something external, yet access to it is mediated through perception, and perception is embodied. A body accustomed to vigilance narrows perception. A body that feels relatively safe allows perception to expand. This is not psychological theory alone, it is lived physiology. When the nervous system is in a state of threat, attention becomes selective, scanning for risk. When the system relaxes, attention widens, noticing nuance and opportunity. Many spiritual narratives encourage transcending the body, yet this approach often reinforces misalignment. The body is not an obstacle to higher awareness. It is the ground through which awareness becomes stable. When the body is bypassed, insight remains abstract. When the body is included, insight becomes integrated. This integration is what allows alignment to persist beyond momentary experiences. The body also carries memory, not just personal memory, but relational and emotional memory. Experiences of loss, betrayal, or prolonged stress imprint themselves somatically. These imprints shape posture, movement, and even the sense of personal space. Over time, they influence how close one allows possibility to come. A person whose body has learned that closeness equals danger may unconsciously keep opportunity at a distance, even while consciously desiring change. Restoring alignment involves renegotiating this somatic memory, not through analysis but through experience. When the body encounters moments of safety, presence, and non-demand, it updates its expectations. These moments need not be extraordinary. They can be found in stillness in nature, in authentic connection, or in periods of unstructured time. What matters is the quality of internal permission, the absence of pressure to perform or resolve. As the body recalibrates, emotional tone shifts as well. Emotions begin to move rather than stagnate. Sadness may arise and pass without becoming identity. Fear may surface without dictating action. Joy may appear quietly without the need for amplification. This fluidity indicates increased coherence. The system is no longer locked into a narrow range of responses. It has regained flexibility. This flexibility alters how intentions are held. Intentions formed in a tense body often carry an undercurrent of force. They are attempts to escape the present rather than engage with it. Intentions formed in a regulated body feel different. They are oriented toward direction rather than outcome. There is less urgency to arrive and more openness to unfold. This difference profoundly affects how the field of possibilities responds. The body also mediates trust. Trust is not a belief, it is a sensation. It is felt as a sense of ground beneath experience. When the body does not trust, the mind compensates with control. When the body begins to trust, control loosens naturally. This does not result in passivity, but in responsiveness. Actions arise from attunement rather than fear of error. Alignment in this embodied sense does not eliminate challenge. It changes the relationship to challenge. Instead of bracing against difficulty, the system meets it with presence. This presence allows information to be extracted from experience rather than avoided. Growth becomes less about pushing through and more about integrating through. The language of the body is subtle yet persistent. It signals alignment through ease, flow, and groundedness. It signals misalignment through contraction, restlessness, and fatigue. Learning to listen to this language is not a skill acquired overnight. It is a remembering of an intelligence that has always been present. When this intelligence is honored, the connection to the broader field of life deepens naturally. This chapter underscores a simple but often overlooked truth. Alignment is not achieved by thinking alone. It is lived through the body. As the body shifts from defense to participation, the individual becomes more available to life. And in that availability, the field of possibilities ceases to be a distant concept and becomes an ongoing embodied experience. Identity, time, and the invisible contracts that shape reality. There is an unspoken agreement most people carry with life, formed quietly through years of experience rather than conscious choice. This agreement shapes identity, timing, and expectation, determining what feels possible long before any deliberate intention is formed. It is not written in words, yet it governs behavior with remarkable consistency. When this internal contract remains unconscious, it limits reality not by force but by familiarity. Life unfolds within the boundaries of what feels internally permitted. Identity is often understood as personality or self-image, but at a deeper level it is a collection of embodied conclusions. Conclusions about what effort leads to, about how much one is allowed to receive, about whether change is safe or costly. These conclusions become reference points. The system does not question them because they have been reinforced over time. Even when circumstances change, identity often lags behind, continuing to operate from an outdated map. This lag creates a peculiar tension. Opportunities may appear, yet feel mistimed. Support may be offered, yet feel undeserved. Expansion may be sensed, yet postponed. This is frequently interpreted as external delay, but it is more accurately an internal misalignment with timing. The inner system has not yet updated its contract. It is still living according to an earlier version of reality, one shaped by limitation, adaptation, or survival. Time itself is experienced differently depending on identity. When identity is rooted in scarcity, time feels like pressure. There is never enough of it, and its passage feels threatening. This creates urgency, which compresses perception. When identity begins to loosen its grip on scarcity, time feels less adversarial. Moments gain depth. The present becomes inhabitable rather than something to escape. In this shift, timing aligns more naturally. Actions occur with less friction, not because they are rushed, but because they are congruent. Many people attempt to change their future without renegotiating their identity. This creates an internal contradiction. The desire for a new life coexists with loyalty to an old self-concept. The old identity resists not out of malice, but out of habit. It has learned to survive within certain parameters and interprets deviation as risk. Until this identity is gently questioned, it continues to shape outcomes through subtle avoidance, hesitation, or self-sabotage. These dynamics often manifest as patterns that seem external: repeated delays, similar obstacles, familiar disappointments. Yet beneath these repetitions lies a consistent internal stance. The stance might be one of over-responsibility, under-receiving, or chronic self-reliance. Each stance carries an invisible rule. For example, the belief that ease must be earned through struggle, or that support leads to loss of autonomy. These rules are rarely articulated, yet they guide behavior relentlessly. Renegotiating these invisible contracts does not occur through declaration alone. The system updates identity through experience. When moments arise that contradict old conclusions and are allowed to register fully, identity begins to shift. A moment of receiving without cost, a moment of rest without guilt, a moment of saying no without collapse. Each of these moments introduces new data into the system. Over time, the internal contract adjusts. As identity evolves, the relationship with possibility changes. Possibility no longer feels like an intrusion into a fragile balance. It begins to feel like a natural extension of self. This is when the field of possibilities appears more responsive, not because it has changed, but because the internal threshold for receiving has expanded. The system can now tolerate more without reverting to defense. Time plays a crucial role in this process. Identity change does not occur instantly. It unfolds through repetition and reinforcement. Each aligned experience strengthens the new contract. Each moment of coherence confirms the updated map. This gradual process can be frustrating for a mind accustomed to immediate results. Yet it is precisely this gradualism that makes alignment stable rather than temporary. Another aspect of identity is the relationship with uncertainty. Older contracts often equate uncertainty with danger. This creates a need for control, prediction, and constant reassurance. As identity matures, uncertainty becomes less threatening. It is recognized as a space of emergence rather than collapse. This recognition allows engagement with the unknown without chronic tension. The system becomes curious rather than defensive. This shift has profound implications for manifestation and alignment. When uncertainty is tolerated, the system remains open. Openness allows interaction with complexity. Life is complex, non-linear, and often unpredictable. An identity that can remain present within this complexity has access to a wider range of responses. It is less likely to default to rigid patterns. In this flexibility, possibility flourishes. The invisible contracts that shape reality are not broken through force. They dissolve through relevance. When they no longer match lived experience, they lose authority. This requires patience, not resignation. Patience grounded in observation rather than waiting. As the system witnesses its own evolution, trust builds. Trust in its capacity to adapt, to integrate, to expand. This chapter illuminates how deeply identity and time intertwine with alignment. It invites recognition of the quiet agreements that have guided life thus far, not to judge them, but to see whether they still serve. As these agreements loosen, reality responds with subtle shifts. Timing improves. Choices feel clearer. Effort decreases. Life begins to feel less like a negotiation and more like a conversation. In this state, the field of universal possibilities is no longer distant. It is encountered in the rhythm of daily life, in the ease of certain decisions, in the resonance of unexpected opportunities. Alignment becomes a lived experience, shaped by identity that has learned to evolve rather than defend. And in that evolution, the future opens not through force but through coherence. As this journey comes to a close, what remains is not a formula, a promise, or a belief to adopt, but a quieter and more enduring realization. Alignment is not something added to life, it is something remembered within it. It is the moment when internal noise softens enough for truth to be felt again, when effort gives way to clarity, and when the relationship with existence shifts from resistance to dialogue. The field of universal possibilities has never been distant. It has always responded to the quality of presence brought into each moment. Throughout this exploration, one theme has remained constant: coherence precedes change. When the inner world stops fragmenting itself through contradiction, life begins to reflect a different rhythm, not because challenges disappear, but because they are met from a place of wholeness rather than division. The body relaxes its vigilance, identity loosens its outdated contracts, time regains depth and perception widens. In this widening, possibility becomes visible again. True alignment does not require perfection or certainty. It requires sincerity. It requires allowing inner states to be acknowledged rather than managed, allowing the body to participate rather than endure, and allowing identity to evolve rather than defend. This sincerity creates an internal stability that no external circumstance can provide. From that stability, action becomes cleaner, rest becomes restorative, and direction becomes intuitive rather than forced. The universe, in this context, is not an external authority granting or withholding outcomes. It is a responsive field, mirroring the coherence or fragmentation within the individual. When coherence deepens, interaction with life becomes less strained. Synchronicities feel natural, not mystical. Opportunities feel timely, not overwhelming. Even uncertainty begins to feel like an open space rather than a threat. This is not the end of a process, but the grounding of a new relationship with oneself and with life. A relationship based on listening rather than demanding, on presence rather than urgency, on alignment rather than effort. From this place, transformation unfolds organically, guided by integrity instead of fear. And in that unfolding, the field of possibilities is no longer something to reach for. It is something you stand within, moment by moment, fully present and quietly aligned. Before you move on, pause for a moment and reflect honestly. If nothing in your external life changed immediately, but your internal relationship with yourself did, would that already be a meaningful shift? And if coherence became your foundation, what kind of life would naturally emerge from that state? If this reflection resonated with you, consider subscribing to this channel. This space is dedicated to depth, clarity, and real transformation, not shortcuts or empty promises. By subscribing, you stay connected to conversations that invite presence, alignment, and conscious evolution. Continue watching on the end screen to deepen this journey. The next video expands on these themes, helping you explore alignment as a living practice rather than a distant ideal. Stay with the process. Stay with the conversation. Life responds when you do.